I have experienced firsthand the power of AI tools and how it can really push your work to the next level. At the same time, I also hear the concerns with regards to the ethics of AI, and also as creatives, like what is the extent of your originality or your own point of view.
Welcome to AI Policy Brew, a podcast where we engage on topics at the intersection of technology, policy, and society. I'm your host, Wilson White. And when we talk about AI and the future of work, the conversation often involves macroeconomic numbers, macroeconomic projections, but behind those numbers are real people, real stories, and a lot of anxiety around the impact that AI technology will have on jobs and the workforce, especially among young professionals, many of whom are contemplating the first steps in their career or transitions early in their career. And that's why I'm very excited about the guest that we're having on the show today. We have Joel Lim, who is the managing director of ZYRUP Media and the host of Political Prude, a podcast on politics. We also have Jazlyn J, who's a technical business analyst at NCS. And recently, Jazz had a massive career pivot from a non-technical background into technology. First, let me start with a very important question. What are we drinking today?
For me, I brought an iced Milo kosong. So it's more of a nostalgic drink for locals. Everyone loves the taste and comfort of Milo. I think this is a everyday drink, and it represents a bit of a everyday utility to me. So transitioning from accounting to tech, it's more of a, how do I simplify all these complex systems into an everyday functional use for me?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a little on the healthy side.
That's
so
different.
Very light.
Different. Joel, what are we drinking?
So I brought one of my favorite drinks. It's called Neslo, and it's a mix of kopi, and the other is a Milo as well. And it's kind of like a local or regional version of a mocha. And think about metaphor to today's conversation. It's really about, two very strong, distinct flavors with strengths that are coming together without replacing one or the other.
Are we drinking this hot or are we drinking this iced?
I believe this one's iced, but they're both good.
Let's
Trust.
try it. Oh, this is pretty good. I love the philosophies behind both of the reasons why you chose these drinks. So I think it's probably good to just start there, Jazz. As you look at your peers, like early career professionals, and kind of how they are experiencing the workforce, how they're thinking about AI technology and the adoption of AI technology in their work, where is this workplace anxiety coming from?
I think a lot of my peers are just facing some anxiety of the job search. So not knowing what the future holds, how AI moves so fast. And a lot of companies like to use AI and try and push that usage for basic administrative tasks and all the lower level, entry-level professionals roles. So I think some of my friends who, let's say, are uni graduates, fresh grads here and there, they're scared of the AI taking away their foundation. I feel some of them think that the starting point is gone for them. So how do they develop their careers if there's no starting point for them at all?
That's a very valid concern. And frankly, it's not just a concern among early career professionals. You see that same concern completely up the stack. I will say in every major technology shift, the same kind of concern is raised, whether it was from PC to the internet, from mobile to AI now. This kind of initial friction is there, even if the long-term job growth numbers net out to be positive. One example of this that I like to think about is the introduction of the ATM machine. Now, when ATM machines came out, a lot of concern around bank teller jobs. Yep. You can understand that, right? A lot of the tasks that ATMs do are tasks that bank tellers typically did before. And turns out it was true. When ATMs were introduced and started being adopted wide scale, we did see a drop in bank teller jobs. But interestingly, over time, that changed. One, because the bank started achieving some efficiencies with ATMs, and customers started wanting more of the services because of the availability of those services and how convenient it was.
Right.
So as a result of that, those efficiencies, as well as that heightened demand, bank owners were able to have more branches. closer to communities.
Yep.
Every branch will need to have at least some number of tellers. So over time, we actually saw the number of bank tellers increase. And so I think over time, this kind of initial friction kind of nets out. But that concern is very valid, and I think it's a concern that has some historical precedent.
Yep.
The AI numbers actually are throwing us for a curveball a bit because, as we've seen in past shifts, that kind of early friction may have a bit of a drop, even though the long-term numbers are positive. But there's been a recent study with I think it was the Strata Education Foundation that found that 46% of talent leaders believe that there's going to be an increase in entry-level hiring this year. And so that early data around AI, I think, is quite interesting to look at. So Joel, let's talk about you. You're in the creative space, and that's an area where there's a lot of excitement around what AI can do in the creative space. At the same time, there's a lot of concern. How is this playing out in your world?
I guess when I have conversations with peers in the industry, I see two camps. You have companies or media entrepreneurs who say, I am all in on AI and I'm going to pivot my entire business to be AI focused because this is the future. And their service offerings now, are tailored to specifically creating AI work for clients. And then you have the other end of the spectrum that say, I don't quite support AI or what it stands for. And therefore, my company is going to be entirely anti-AI. I see myself kind of being in the middle. I have experienced firsthand the power of AI tools and how it can really push your work to the next level. At the same time, I also hear the concerns with regards to the ethics of AI. And also, as creatives, what is the extent of your originality or your own point of view with using AI tools in your workflow as well. So for me, it's just finding that balance.
Let's talk about this shadow AI concept that it's come up in a previous conversation on the show. This idea that workers, particularly young professionals, they see the value in the AI tools. And so they are using those tools in their day-to-day work, even if their company or their organization hasn't really adopted an AI policy. Are you guys seeing that in your work?
I know some people want to use a certain AI tool, let's say Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek and all that, but the company might restrict that and not allow internal use. Maybe because of internal documents are private and confidential. Let's say my peers also do that because it really helps their work. So I think it's a bit of a struggle between adhering to the company's guidelines and also being able to do your work efficiently.
Joel, this idea of not waiting for the company policy, just kind of going for the tools that add value. I'd love to hear from you on how you're seeing the value of these AI tools in your day-to-day work.
In the workplace, I think most people do use AI tools already. It's just the question is, at what extent do you use it? I think the important thing here is transparency. And for my team, from the very beginning, I was having a town hall with the team and I said, look, when it comes to AI, I would rather know what you're doing with AI than you hiding it from me. At the very start, when AI became a new tool that everyone was talking about in the industry, there was a little bit of stigma with regards to the use of it with work. In Singapore, we grew up in an environment where, you have to take ownership of your work, like outsourcing your work or claiming ownership of work that's not yours is kind of frowned upon. I know how I use AI, right? And my original ideas, my line of thinking, which I also know is my asset, I don't want it to be replaced by AI. So I want to be very clear that my ideas are still mine. When I encourage my team to use AI tools, I encourage them to use it in the same method or same way, whereby you still have your own original ideas first before you introduce AI tools into your workflow. And I guess when you start to formalize that structure, that's where you start having guidelines in place, you start having best practices, lists that you can send out to the team. On a larger scale, that's when you have AI governance at the workplace as well.
Jazz, let me come back to you on how you are using this. How is AI helping you in your own productivity and some of the big projects that you're working on at your company?
For me personally, I use AI a lot day to day. I even set up a personal automation tool. So for context, I work full-time in NCS and also part-time studying computing in NTU. I need a PA. So I decided I don't want to pay for a PA. I'll build my own PA. So I use OpenClaw, utilizing Gemini 2.5 Flash model.
Nice.
Yeah, which is great. It's really strong enough. And it helps me with my day-to-day decisions. So it reduces a lot of decision fatigue and also saves me about 5 to 10 hours a week. Every morning, my bot, Steve, will give me a
Steve.
Yeah, Steve.
That's a name.
Yeah, I name him Steve. He'll give me an update like, hey Jazz, this is your morning brief. This is what you have today. In my work, I use AI to help me with brainstorming and also coming up with some ideas for certain projects. So right now, I'm actually doing a collaboration project with Google Cloud and GovTech. We're building a video analysis tool to be able to detect unsafe behavior in dashcam footage. Humans were analyzing hundreds of hours of data and footage. It's not really a good use of time.
Joel, so you host the Political Prude podcast, which is a podcast that's aimed at helping young people decipher and understand Singapore politics. I'm aware of the 2025 Singapore general elections and how much of a massive operational undertaking that was. Can you talk a bit about how you and your team have deployed AI to kind of help you from an operational standpoint in your space?
The show became a hit because the prior election to that, which was the presidential election, we managed to interview all 4 interested candidates in running, and eventually they became 3. But we were the first podcast in Singapore to interview all 4. And because of that, I think a lot of audiences found us to be legit and wanted to then listen to the show. And when the general election came around, then everyone started asking, okay, what are you guys doing for this election? How are you going to cover it? The presidential election only had 3 candidates, whereas the general election, you had so many different parties, and every party obviously has multiple candidates. So I was in a little bit of a pickle when I look at my company versus like the larger ones out there. We were, I think, less than 10 people, and it was just impossible for us to be able to cover all of that based on the existing workflow that we had. And I said, well, if I was to have a fighting chance in covering this election in a way that's responsible to the audience as well, I think I need to rethink that workflow. And in the pre-production, what we usually do is that we would go down to the National Library and we would sit down for hours and hours going through all these different books and just understanding the topics that we're about to discuss. And then we would do our newspaper articles online, we would watch YouTube, we would listen to podcasts, and you can really imagine how much time that would take. We said, okay, how can we shorten that time frame? And we zoomed in on Gemini's deep research tool. At the very end of every report, you would see a bibliography of all the different links that they would reference. We just went straight to the sources that were cited and therefore kind of reverse engineered that process. And we had our list of sources that we could use immediately. In the production process, what the team did was that they hooked up the microphones to a laptop, and they actually started a Google meeting as we were having the conversation. And on screen, you can already see the live closed captions being generated.
Wow.
So when we are speaking and having a conversation, the team is on the side already screenshotting, copying paragraphs and saying, okay, this could be used in the trailer. This could be used as a short content clip for TikTok or Instagram Reel. Once the meeting ended, we had the transcript generated immediately.
I'm just struck by how much of your work, the tasks that are part of your work, whether it's your personal assistant or whether it's helping you in your production process, just struck by how much of that you're handing over to AI and handing over to technology to do. So in a world in which you're doing that, how do young people gain that deep expertise, those foundational skills you referenced at the top of our conversation, Jazz?
I think it's still up to the individual to be able to not utilize AI so much that their cognitive development is stuck. For me and my team, we try to use AI as more of really just an assistant. We still need to know the foundation of what we're working on. And we can use AI as more of a brainstorming partner, a way to find out if there's any gaps in our thinking or how we can optimize and make the pipeline even better, and with which tools that we might not even know about. So I think AI's use is pretty good in finding any gaps. In the end, the team still needs to be able to build it if AI never existed.
So for me, I think it lies actually a paradox, but it lies in the creative use of AI as well. For example, when I was going on to different interviews during the election season, I wanted to make sure that I fully understood what I was going to be talking about. That was a way for me to use the live function of AI as a coach. I would say, okay, well, let's pretend that we're in an interview right now. Ask me questions and I'll give it my answers and then tell me if my answers are good. In a way, while you're outsourcing a lot of the grunt work to AI, at the same time, you don't want to lose the essence of what you need to understand. And to test whether or not you still understand those things, you can use AI to actually check in with you and also course correct as well.
I'm kind of enamored on how you guys are deploying the technology in your space. What makes you hopeful about the trajectory that AI adoption is on?
I think for me as a small business owner, I think we're looking at AI and how it has really transformed my own journey as well. I think it really democratizes, this whole process of running a business. One example I can give you is that I can now approach contracts and leases with so much more confidence. Whereas, in the past, you'll be thinking about, okay, do I need a lawyer for this to go through my contracts for me? Of course, for, higher stakes contracts, you should. But for something as simple as, maybe like a lease contract for the office space, I was able to use AI tools to then help explain this in a layman term for myself. I think it's an incredible time to start your own business or run a small side hustle, just because it's just so empowering a space to be in. And that is what makes me hopeful.
Jazz, what about you? What makes you hopeful about the trajectory that AI is on?
For me personally, I feel because AI is taking away all the grunt work and all the things that we don't want to spend time on. So that frees up a lot of time for us, right? So I think people can focus on more impactful, human-driven projects. So any projects that involve maybe social responsibility and also community is something that we actually have time for now, thanks to AI. With the use of AI being a productivity tool, it gives me and everyone, I feel, a lot more time to focus more on these kind of projects, which are more tailored for what we're meant to do as humans, to have human connection and fostering human community and everything.
I agree, and that's why I'm optimistic about the trajectory that we're on. But this question of like the downsides, the risk of widespread adoption where people are using this for everything, they're not actually taking the time to actually do the critical thinking, to do the risk assessments, to actually put the human touch on the issue. Do you guys worry about that?
For me, it's actually revisiting the fundamentals. As much as we start automating a lot of tasks, I guess it goes back to the mentality of, in order to break the rules, you got to know the rules in the first place. So for me and my team, I'm always going back to the fundamentals of design, the fundamentals of visual hierarchy, things like that, right? Whereby we take things for granted now when it comes to these creative foundations. But for me, I spend time on a monthly basis, an hour, 2 hours, just going through all of that with the team. Also just training the muscle continuously. And when you start using those creative muscles to verbalize some of these terms, some of these concepts, you are way more able to then exercise those muscles when it comes to actually executing your work. I'm also a content creator, and I think Political Prude started because I had a lot of very strong opinions on different topics that I wanted to express as well. And a lot of the audience comes to my platform to understand larger topics broken down into simpler terms, right? So I was very cognizant of the fact that the audience exists only because they like my point of view and they like the way I think. And I had to work with that in mind.
What about you? How are you maintaining your kind of love for learning, critical thinking?
It comes to how mindful you are on how much you're using and how much AI is doing the work for you. So keeping that in mind, personally, whenever I open up the Gemini app, I will need to ask myself, what exactly am I doing right now? So am I just offloading all my thoughts and just letting it think for me? Or am I giving my original idea and then letting it maybe just help me? To balance the risk, I think that as long as I know personally what I'm using it for and not really offloading everything, like all my schoolwork, all my work to it, I'm just using it as a tool. That's what AI should just be, a tool to help us, like a hammer or a knife or a light. It's just a tool that we use for a certain purpose.
There is this balance of finding the right way of having guardrails in place, but also allowing the technology to have some of these benefits. This is a policy podcast, so I want to ask you guys a policy question. If you had an opportunity to speak to government officials or business leaders, what would you say is an effective way of ensuring the proper training and skilling for an AI-powered future?
I think a lot of these organizations and the higher-ups need to understand some of the work and roles that happen at the bottom, because I think everyone up there is a lot of strategy and business focused. They don't really see maybe like the nitty-gritty of the entry-level roles that are in their organization. So I think if they know kind of their day-to-day processes. It will help them in enabling their employees to be able to adopt AI better. Instead of focusing on all these features, like I know a lot of organizations like to push, oh, we have this feature, that feature. But for the employee who, let's say, isn't even pro AI, they would find that it's an additional thing to learn on top of their work, right? So I think they need to show how using AI can improve their work and what kind of value they can see. Let's say saving 10 hours a week, or even automating your emails or your calls even, and all this, to make your work easier, but not to replace your job. In the end, you still have to be the human part of the job.
Great. Joel?
For me, it's basically the same thing, whereby it's AI governance with the everyday person in mind. Everyone is moving at a different pace. It's always good to just check in. As much as I'm always introducing the new tools, having training programs, whatever, during my one-on-one sessions with the team, I'm always asking them, right, so when it comes to AI, like, how are you feeling about it? What anxieties do you have? And on a very micro scale of a small company, I'm thinking about how my team members are coping with the transition to having AI tools in the workplace, right? If I amplify that and go on to maybe a national level, like, I think it's still the same concept of going to the everyday person and asking them, where are you and how are you feeling about this AI integration or adoption on a national scale? Whether you are a policymaker or you're someone in a position to decide on how AI governance should go about, I would like to see more conversations or examples of AI governance policies being communicated and understanding the logic behind them as well. Yeah, I think that would be incredibly helpful.
I think it's going to be a critical part in not only how we integrate AI into the workforce, but how we actually collectively deal with what the future of work will actually be. One of the other risks, though, I think with AI technology, and this came up in one of our previous guests on the show, is the risk of misuse. I think if we're going to be in an AI-powered economy and you're not using the technology, you're not getting those productivity gains, that really is a risky, I think, move given the trajectory of where we're on. Public First had a study that said that AI, the AI sector and industries that are deploying AI have the potential to create 14 million jobs by 2035. So the jobs of the future really will have AI embedded in them. So using the technology is actually a great preparation for what the future of work will look like. And so in addition to the risk of maybe overusing or not thinking critically because you're giving much of that work over to AI, not using it is also, I think, risky as well.
Absolutely. Yep. When I first entered my first internship, one of the more shocking things that I took away from it was that I was able to enter meeting rooms and have my voice matter in them. And I've always had this impression that if you're entering a space as a newcomer, you're probably not going to be heard. And then I reflected on those conversations and I wondered, like, why were people looking to me for my opinion? And I could boil it down to the fact that I was a digital native. So then when it comes to conversations about social media and social media marketing, they would want to hear from someone who has
the expertise
or just being a daily user of it. And that's when I realized that, oh my goodness, as a newcomer, my opinion mattered maybe even more than someone who has way more experience in the industry than me, but maybe just did not use social media. And that's exactly what you're saying, right? And when I saw this new wave of technological advancements, now I'm in a position whereby, I've had a couple of years in the industry now, and I want to not miss, that boat, right? Whereby, what if I go into a meeting room today and my voice becomes irrelevant or not being heard, right? And someone else who is so much more capable in AI tools will now have that opportunity over me. So I think that's something I'm very aware of as well, just wanting to be prepared for the future.
Thanks for that great advice. I think one of the things that we've learned here is that the future of work is not a predetermined track. It's actually a reflection of the decisions that we all make collectively. So Joel, Jazz, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for your insights and perspective, but also thanks for having a drink with me today.
Cheers. Cheers.